Deep within the lost woods, past the fairy folk, through the meadow, and up the stone steps, lies the forest temple. This giant stone structure stands in contrast to the small, natural homes of the nearby Kokiri tribe. When we go inside, we're eventually met with 4 poes, which block our path forward and scatter. Now, who are these poes? What is the forest temple, and who built it? The first thing that stands out about these poes is they're all different colors, and they each have their own unique design. It's obvious these aren't your everyday poes, and as we venture further into the forest temple, fighting them one by one, Navi will give us a little nugget of info. These poes have names: Joelle, Beth, Amy, and Meg, known collectively as the Poe Sisters. These are actually the names of the 4 sisters in Little Women, which Satoru Takizawa said he watched the animated adaptation of while working on the Poe Sisters, and was so moved by it he named the poes after them. He also stated that the spirits, which are priestesses that served the temple, weren't bad, and perhaps it was Ganondorf's evil energy that corrupted their hearts, which he says is why we see the oldest sister Meg in the main room, sobbing. She's crying for her sisters. I think them being priestesses explains their influence over the temple, which we see when they block our way forward, forcing us to fight them to unlock the path leading to Phantom Ganon. There's another small detail Takizawa brought up as well, saying specifically that they were 4 beautiful sisters, so I think it's safe to assume they were alive when they served the Forest Temple. I'm thinking, since we see them there as poes now, that they either died there, or their remains reside somewhere on the grounds. Before I talk more about the Poe Sisters, I want to go over some things about the Forest Temple itself. One of the main things that stands out to me about the Forest Temple is that it doesn't look like I'd expect it to. What I mean by that is each sage we see is a different race, and each temple's location seems to align with where the race of its sage lives. The Gorons are associated with the Fire Temple, Zoras with the Water Temple, Gerudos with the Spirit Temple, and Sheikah with the Shadow Temple. The Temple of Light, within the Sacred Realm, has a Hylian sage, so I'm assuming that's the race that temple is correlated with. That leaves the Forest Temple, with Saria, a Kokiri, as the current sage. This lines up perfectly with her character, and the Kokiri in general, with them obviously closely linked with nature. It is the Forest Temple after all. I don't expect to see a Goron sage. However, the architecture seems drastically different than anything we see with the Kokiri. Now, I understand that each race may not have built their corresponding temples, but no matter who built them, the looks and vibes of the other temples line up with what I would expect to see from each of those races, with the exception of the Forest Temple. In Kokiri Forest, the shop and all the houses are hollowed out tree stumps. They're also pretty small, and the furnishings inside have a natural look to them. This is drastically different from what we see in the Forest Temple. A tall stone staircase leading to a grand building, also made of stone, with high ceilings, sprawling courtyards, and rooms that literally twist and turn. This place is huge. It doesn't look Kokiri at all, and I don't believe a bunch of kids built it. And it's not just the architecture that makes me think this, but also the fact that they don't even seem to know about it. The Sacred Forest Meadow is referred to as Saria's secret place, but with the stairs being broken, she probably doesn't know about the temple until she awakens as a sage. I also don't think the Deku Tree had any part in its construction, but I do think both him and the Lost Woods are very closely tied to the temple, which I'll go over soon. So if the Kokiri didn't build the temple, who did? Some theories point to the Hylians, with many believing it was possibly an abandoned castle or mansion. It definitely fits the style we see around Hyrule Castle and the Temple of Time, with both the scale and the stonework. And with the temple's ties to the protection of the Sacred Realm, and the royal family closely tied to the Triforce, I don't think their involvement is completely out of the question. It at least seems more probable than the Kokiri building it. I mean, this guy is struggling to lift a rock. There's no way he's building an entire temple out of stone. So I'm not 100% sure about who built it, but I definitely lean towards Hylians. Now let's talk about these broken stairs. Everything looks old and overtaken by nature to a degree, but there's no level of disrepair that indicates these stairs broke naturally. The temple isn't crumbling and falling apart, it's just covered in vines and stuff. So I think they were broken on purpose, but why? Well, there's a bunch of different ways to look at this. If this was once a castle or a mansion, then there's a chance they broke the stairs themselves in an attempt to deter enemies or looters during the Civil War. Seems a little drastic, but not entirely out of the realm of possibility. On the flip side, this could have also been a way for enemies to limit or stop the flow of supplies to whoever was inside, a common siege tactic to starve out an opposing force. We also need to consider that the Deku Tree might have broke them for some reason. Let's keep digging and ask ourselves, why was it built to begin with? And why here? The area leading to the Forest Temple, Saria's secret spot, which also happens to be the spot where we teleport when we play the menu at a forest, is called the Sacred Forest Meadow. In Japanese, it's called Mori no Seiki. Let's break that down. Mori means forest, or woods. No is what's known as a possessive particle, a word used in some languages like Japanese to show ownership or relationship, functioning similar to '(s) or of in English. And Seiki means sacred precincts, sanctuary, consecrated ground, or holy ground. So this whole meadow is implied to have some spiritual meaning or significance, explaining why the Forest Temple would be located nearby. Now, was it built to be a temple, or did it become one later? I mentioned how many believe the layout of the temple itself seems more like a castle or mansion as opposed to a place of worship. With its huge courtyards, multiple floors, elegant rugs, and large paintings, this all points to it possibly being built by the royal family or someone wealthy. These are big leaps to be made from small details, but it's really hard to come to a definitive answer because we don't see rooms with beds, or a kitchen area, or something that would help us identify the temple's original purpose. To me, the idea of it being a castle or a mansion seems plausible, but I believe that if that were the case, that part of the structure was still dedicated to being a temple. Like maybe in its infancy, just a small part of the Forest Temple was actually the temple, with the rest of the structure being something else. That, or it was just built grand because of its importance as a temple, which would match the scale of all the other temples in the game. Either way, I think it's always been a temple. The alternative is me believing a temple is built in each area that's significant, but this one temple here is just using a repurposed building, one that happens to be conveniently built in the right place, which is also in the middle of nowhere. I'm not saying it's impossible, I just don't buy it. So, if it has always been a temple, what would make this area specifically suitable for its construction? Well, I pointed out earlier how the Japanese name for the Sacred Forest Meadow heavily implies this area is holy, it's sacred, it's spiritually significant. Now, when I was looking into the translation of Mori no Seiki, I had the thought that I should look into Japanese temples as well. If a game was made in Japan, a place with temples, it would stand to reason that the Forest Temple might have some kind of connection or inspiration from these real-world places. In fact, Shigeru Miyamoto grew up in the Kyoto prefecture, which has roughly 1,600 Buddhist temples and 400 Shinto shrines. With that thought, I found a really cool connection and some symbolism that I believe is intentional, and not something I knew about before. And this, for me at least, made this whole video worth doing. But for me to share this with you, we need to take a little detour and talk about Shinto. I want to start this next section off by saying that I'm by no means an expert on Shinto or Japanese culture. I'm going to be talking about some things that I researched a lot, but I may not fully understand. So I definitely apologize if I accidentally misrepresent what Shinto is. We're not going to go super deep into this, just enough to understand a few things. With that said, let's get to it. Shinto is a religion originating in Japan that emphasizes things such as purity, harmony, a reverence for nature, and a deep appreciation and respect for one's ancestors and family. Shinto means the way of the kami, which are divine spirits or deities believed to inhabit natural things like mountains, trees, rivers, pretty much nature and landscapes. Practices are usually focused on rituals at shrines to help people connect with these kami, show gratitude, and to purify oneself of spiritual pollution. Some shrines are tiny, while others have huge, ornate structures. Side note, while the Forest Temple is called a temple, I definitely think it's more like a Shinto shrine. Its Japanese name, Mori no Shinden, can be translated as both Temple of the Forest or Shrine of the Forest. I think they just went with temple for the English translation, maybe because they thought it sounded better. Anyways, back to Shinto. These shrines are typically maintained by Shinshoku or Kannushi, Japanese clergy members that perform rituals and act as an in-between for people and kami. They're also known as Shinto priests. They often have the assistance of a Miko, which you may know as a shrine maiden, which is a priestess that helps maintain the overall cleanliness of the shrine, conducts sacred rituals, does prayers with people, performs ceremonial dances, and sometimes even sells amulets, charms, and fortune slips. This is what I think the Poe Sisters were: Shinto priestesses, shrine maidens that were responsible for the care of the forest temple. Since the game originates in Japan, and Takizawa specifically calls them priestesses, I think that this could be what he meant by that. A connection to Shinto might give us some insight into the day-to-day activities of the Poe Sisters before they died, along with some idea as to how the forest temple may have functioned in the past. Now, while I think that's really cool, it's not the connection I mentioned earlier that got me excited. In Shinto, Chinju no Mori, or guardian forests, are sacred and typically ancient forests that surround some Shinto shrines, and are usually inhabited by kami. And in a place like this, you might find a kami known as Kukunochi, the tree trunk elder, the kami of trees. Now, when I read about this, my mind immediately went to the Deku tree. If that guy isn't a tree trunk elder, then I don't know what is. And I think the Lost Woods mirror Chinju no Mori, literally acting as a guardian forest in-game, protecting the Kokiri. It also surrounds the forest temple, just like it would a Shinto shrine, and like a shrine, it was even tended to by priestesses. I also think the journey to the forest temple could mirror that of a pilgrimage, traveling through the woods, navigating the labyrinth in the sacred forest meadow, going up the stone staircase, eventually ending at the temple itself. And if you look on both sides where the stairs should be, we see a tree with a branch going over the stairs, and a tree stump on its opposite side. If this tree here was still growing, it almost looks like it would have formed something similar to a torii gate, which in Shinto marks the entrance to a shrine, showing the transition between the human world and the sacred divine realm. This is what I found exciting. Once I saw Kukunochi, all these other themes and connections fell into place, not just giving insight into the temple and the Poe Sisters, but also weaving the significance of the Deku tree in the Lost Woods together with the forest temple and the sacred forest meadow. It might just be me getting worked up because I already have a deep interest in yokai, which are kind of the opposite side of the coin as kami, so I'm kind of biased because I already find all this super interesting. But biases aside, I definitely think the links to the themes found in Shinto seem to line up. And with the heavy emphasis on nature and where different kami reside, I think this is also reflected beyond the forest temple, which is something worth considering when theorizing about other temples. The only outlier at a glance would maybe be the Shadow Temple, but I think this place is a reflection of the bloody history of Hyrule, so its creatures are maybe more like evil spirits than kami, and its darkness fueled by the graveyard it sits by. So how does all this fit together? If the forest temples function as a temple, and duties of its priestesses were similar to that seen in Shinto, then I think the Poe Sisters helped to deepen the connection between the non-Kokiri and the forest along with its guardian spirit, the Deku tree. And it may have also assisted any awakened sage at the time, since it was probably built by outsiders, and maybe even maintained by them. It means more people were coming and going through the Lost Woods than when we're playing, especially if others were also visiting the temple, which is a possibility when it was active. So there's a chance that the Lost Woods at that time were less of a threat to outsiders, possibly because the Deku tree didn't see the outside world as a huge danger at the time. And while I don't think it's disputed, I think it's worth pointing out that I think the past forest sages were always Kokiri, or whatever they might have been before becoming Kokiri, even if outsiders built the temple, mainly because their deep connection to the forest, nature, and the Deku tree. And I believe the significance of these areas already existed before the temples, through the connections of the natural world and both its physical and spiritual inhabitants. This is why each temple is represented by its indigenous peoples. They're the ones most connected to that specific area. Now, I believe the Poe Sisters were outsiders, since they were called beautiful, a word I don't think would be used to describe the children of the forest. So this further supports the idea of Hylians, or some other race of outsiders, being able to traverse the forest at one point. Like I said earlier, I lean towards Hylians. With outsiders tending the temple, it makes me wonder if the Kokiri were seen as divine by them at some point, or if they knew about the Kokiri's connection to the forest deity, explaining why the Kokiri wouldn't be temple attendants and would only be involved as a sage. Maybe the Kokiri were just another aspect of the forest that outsiders would connect with spiritually. This would further explain why the Kokiri seemingly don't know about the temple, despite living in the same forest. Now, when we see the temple, it's seemingly abandoned, so why isn't it being tended to? Going back to the idea that the Deku Tree's security was more lax before the Civil War, whatever happened during the war changed that, creating a need to protect the Kokiri and the Sacred Forest Meadow. With the world becoming more dangerous, the Lost Woods becomes how we see it in game, a dizzying place, capable of transforming any who get lost into monsters. And from my experience, the woods are trying to get you lost. Thankfully, we have a guardian fairy to guide us back to safety. Now, this explains outsiders being more of a rarity when we play, but I doubt the Deku Tree would condemn those that were in the temple before this shift in security. He's a good guy. So what happened to them? As I stated earlier, when talking about the stairs, they may have been attacked by enemies, or even starved out. The Poe Sisters are dead when we see them, and with the stairs being broken as a child, I think this most likely happened during the Civil War, or during some other major event we don't know about, with Ganondorf's influence affecting their spirits after the fact. But what if the temple wasn't attacked? What if its abandonment was due to natural circumstances? Maybe they just left, or maybe something a little more sinister happened to them. Due to a line in game, there's a theory that everyone who enters the forest becomes Stalfos. So maybe the Hylians tending the temple would eventually transform into Stalfos, another possible explanation for the death of the Poe Sisters. We do find Stalfos around the temple, so maybe this was just an accepted thing, something that only the most devoted would be willing to do. Serve the forest temple as a priest or priestess, even though you know it will eventually kill you. Or maybe they didn't even know it would happen. Maybe they simply attempted to connect with nature, with the forest, but didn't fully understand the magic associated with what they were connecting with. If they did know, then I think the Poe Sisters either didn't survive long enough to transform, or were purified after transforming. Otherwise, I don't know how they'd go from being Stalfos to Poes. Also, I think in this scenario, it's likely the Deku Tree destroyed the stairs to the temple to protect the Kokiri from the dangers that started blossoming within. Now, let's talk a little more about the Poe Sisters. Even with all this speculation and theory building, we still don't know why the Poe Sisters are Poes. Takizawa mentions their hearts being corrupted by Ganondorf, so I think they only became Poes because of his influence. There's the possibility of them becoming Poes due to how they may have died, being full of hatred, but since the Poe Sisters are described as corrupted and not inherently evil, I think it's this corruption that made their spirits overwhelmed with negative emotions, that then caused them to manifest as Poes. Either way, these devoted shrine maidens were twisted and used by Ganondorf, which really makes you feel for them. The temple was probably their life, and for them to be forced to desecrate it or their beliefs in any way is incredibly cruel, and really highlights the lengths Ganondorf will go to in order to achieve power. I went into this video mildly curious about the Poe Sisters and the Forest Temple, and honestly I fell down a rabbit hole I didn't expect, and I came out the other side with much more sympathy and appreciation for them as characters. I definitely built a shaky structure of theories upon a foundation of assumptions, so I definitely don't think I solved anything. But hopefully, I added a different perspective to consider for your own headcanon. So now, I'm more interested in hearing from all of you. Tell me your theories and thoughts about the Poe Sisters and the Forest Temple in the comments. I'm gonna stop this one here. I've droned on long enough for one video. Hopefully this was somewhat coherent. Organizing my thoughts isn't my strength. I appreciate all of you, especially anyone who made it this far. Your support really means a lot to me. The fact that you take the time to hear me ramble about an old game is awesome, and I'm happy to have a community to share ideas and theories with. So, thanks for watching, till next time.